Hello, everybody, and happy Friday to you. Hopefully, you guys are inside enjoying this weather, or if you're outside, hopefully you're finding yourself a pool to go and cool off in, depending on how the weather is in your neck of the woods. I know I hear in sunny Colorado, it is nice and warm. And yes, I am. After this, I may be going out. No, I'm not going out and doing that. I was going to say I'm going to get in the pool, but you just never know about me from time to time. Right now, I'm just enjoying my lollipop, and I'm getting ready for this brand new episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor. Head over to my YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. And I have a really, really amazing guest for you guys today. And hopefully you guys are going to be tuning in. And if you are, get your pen and pads ready because we're going to be sharing a whole lot of tips with you guys. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments section and we'll be sure to get to them as we go. All right. Now, without further ado, my next guest, Bambi. Bambi, how you doing?
Well, hello. I'm so happy to be here. I even got my blessed glass today for coffee because I'm blessed to be here. So I'm so excited.
Well, I am so honored that you're here today because, we talked the last time, we laughed, we had a great time, great conversation, and today is not going to be any different except for we're going to do even more, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm really looking forward to this. Now, before we get started, tell people who you are, tell people where you're from, and tell people about the work that you do.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Bambi, and it is my real name. If anybody is going to ask that question, I was named Bambi. So I am a mother of 6 adult children. I have 4 daughters, and I have 2 sons, which are identical. I'm twins. I also am a nana of 13 grandchildren, 10 grandsons, and 3 granddaughters. So in fact, today is a day that we're going to talk about one of my, grandchildren. I am a transplant to the South. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and I raised my kids and grew up there. And 2 years ago, my children decided that it was time for me to move down South because they said they're never going back to New York again. So I am a transplant to Georgia. I live in the Golden Isles where the shrimp, they say, is the best around the whole entire world because it is made within the marsh. So I also work for a data company. I go in for the last 16 years of my life. I have gone into people's homes, signed them up for, something. I work for the United States Census Bureau. And then I now work for the Nielsen TV ratings. So I've spent 16 years into thousands of different homes, hearing thousands of different stories and having communication. So that's what I do for a living.
Well,
oh my goodness, I can't believe. And I also became an author. So I don't know why I forget that all the time.
I was about to call you out, right? I was about to call you out like you forgetting the biggest part, right?
I forgot the biggest part. I actually became an author. I've authored 2 books. One of them is called The Journey of Josephine, which will be a year that it will be out on June 9th. I've had it out for a year, and that is the testimony and the raw version of my life and how God took a broken little girl and he mended her and brought her back together again using my ragdoll, which is my security blanket. This past year on St. Patrick's Day, I published my second book called The Treasures of My Heart, which are the different life stories that God has given to me and the treasures amongst the storms. Because sometimes we forget that in the storms, there actually are things that come out of the storm that are good. And so God just reminded me of the goodness of him in the treasures of my heart.
So I love that. And I love that you got those 2 books there because I was going to call you out. I was like, no, she didn't just not forget all of that. We just talked this. We hurt. I was going to give you a hard time because that's what I do, right? And I think it's truly, truly amazing. And you're gonna be reading your story today, right? So you guys, please sit back, enjoy. Bambi, I'm gonna hand it over to you. Go ahead, rock this thing like a rock star, girl.
Well, thank you. I'm actually going to read a story of my grandson that passed away on St. Patrick's Day 5 years ago. So that's why I decided to reach out, to Tony, because I'm a nana that lost a grandchild. And sometimes we forget that everybody is affected through death, not just the parents. So I wrote a short story. It takes about 6 minutes to read about my grandson, and his name is Isaac. Have to put the glasses on because I'm over 50, guys.
And you know what? Don't be calling me out. I'm starting to feel like you're trying to pick a fight with me now. Okay, all of this calling me out and stuff, baby. We're not doing this today. Okay?
That's hysterical. Well, sit back, and hope you have a little bit of tissues because you may cry a little bit, but that's okay. That's called healing.
All right, this is very true. Do you think?
So, absolutely. So, two young kids are at the airport with their belongings on their backs. They are starting a new life together, married but a few days, believing love conquers all. The innocence of those two young kids, thinking nothing could stop them. They had the world in the palm of their hands because they held each other's, thinking nothing could get in the way of their new life as husband and wife. California seemed so far away, but my son was stationed there, so they had no choice. We had gone a few months back, so my future daughter-in-law could see what she was getting herself into, being far away from her family and friends and living so far from civilization. My son was stationed at a training camp in the desert and miles from nowhere. You couldn't get into a car and go to the nearest town because that was almost an hour away. They would be secluded from any family. That was good. That was a good thing because now they were married. We would be looking forward to seeing them at Christmas. I received a few phone calls talking about their everyday life and the food my daughter-in-law would cook. One time I had mentioned how my son loved rice pudding. The response back was, he didn't need mine anymore. He now had hers. I was shocked and hurt that my rice pudding had been replaced by my son's heart, was no longer hidden with mine, but it was replaced now with hers. That was not the only first shock. The second was that they said that they had decided that they were not coming home for Christmas. I thought they were joking, as my son did all the time, but this was no joke. I couldn't hold back the tears, plus the rejection I felt. I was devastated, but it was their life, not mine. So I just had to let it go. But I also pondered, how could I get to them during Christmas? I had come up with a plan. When I talked to the rest of my children, asking what their plans were for Christmas, I realized all of them weren't going to be around. I started planning a trip to the Grand Canyon. I decided to give my son a call and ask whether I could come to Christmas and the three of us could go to the Grand Canyon together. The both of them talked it over and said I could come. I was really surprised by their answer, but surely wasn't going to question it for 1 minute, just in case they changed their mind and realized they just said yes to me for Christmas. I was so excited to get on the plane and head to Las Vegas, where I would get a rental and drive to my son's new home. I got in pretty late, but too excited to even sleep. When I got downstairs, I saw both of them dressed in a one-piece Grinch pajamas. I knew it had to be love because it looked so funny that my son went along with it. We started opening up gifts, and I was handed a box, which I opened. And a piece of paper was in the box with the words, "Your gift was on back order and wouldn't be coming till July." I had no idea what that meant, and I kept reading it over and over again until I realized it was a baby. I was shocked and bewildered, as we all knew that a baby may not be in the cards for both of them because my precious daughter-in-law had some health issues. One of them is that she needed a liver transplant, and the others were female issues. We knew that from the beginning that it wouldn't be easy for her to get pregnant. Well, I guess it was easier than we all thought. I can't tell you how thrilled I was at that very moment. I had a lot of concerns, but I knew my God and he had the situation all under control. I was going to have my 8th grandchild, the number of new beginnings. The pregnancy wasn't easy for my daughter-in-law. The baby was fine and was growing normally. It was the health of her that we all concerned. The doctors informed us that if she got to 24 weeks, they would take care of the rest. And they were excited to find out that they would be parents of a little boy, and they named him Isaac Joseph. Isaac meaning child of promise. Joseph was after her father, a perfect name for a perfect child. My daughter My daughter spent a lot of time in the hospital on complete bed rest. She was being monitored closely. We never stopped praying for her to reach the 24 weeks. That was the target, and that is what we believed. On March 17th of 2019, my girlfriend and I had planned a day in New York City, the Statue of Liberty, the Ellis Island, a history car ride through the streets of New York City. That way, the way that it was in the 1900s. Then lastly, a carriage ride through Central Park. We spent the day laughing and getting ripped off by cab drivers, but had a lot of fun until I received a text message from my son saying my daughter-in-law was rushed to the hospital and taken by helicopter to the Los Angeles Children's Hospital. I still had no care in the world, as the doctors told us all she needed to do was get to 24 weeks and they would take care of the rest. So I continued on our plans and I got into the carriage for our ride through Central Park. I wanted to celebrate that I would be a Nana for the 8th time by the night's end. As our carriage was coming to an end, I received another text message from my son stating, today will be Isaac's lucky day as he will be placed in the arms of Jesus. That was the last text or call I had received from my son for 7 long days. I didn't know what to do, but to get on the train and head back to my hotel. My head was spinning and so many unanswered questions and nobody to ask. The train ride was the longest that I've ever been on. I think time stopped and I couldn't catch up and still in time. I had so many questions because the doctor said 24 weeks. She was 23 weeks and 6 days. I got to my hotel finally. I was in the elevator when I got a FaceTime ring on my phone and it was my daughter-in-law. My phone was being funny because I was in the elevator. I couldn't wait to get to my room and everything seemed to be going wrong. We had to stop at each floor and then my card was giving me trouble to get into my room. But finally, I sat down and I heard my daughter-in-law say, would you like to meet your grandson? The first thing that silly girl did, I will show you the best part last. My precious daughter went inch by inch of that little boy. A mother's love, a soft touch of her hands, as she told me everything about my grandson. He's so beautiful, Mom. Look how little he is. Mom, he's so soft. My heart has exploded with love for my son. He is so perfect. I continued to let her talk. This was her time. This was her moment. If I spoke, I think I would have lost it, but I couldn't. I needed to be strong. This precious girl was losing her son. He was going to be the lucky one on St. Patrick's Day, as soon as he would be in the arms of Jesus. My daughter asked me if I was ready to see the best part of her son. Holding back the tears, I told her I couldn't wait any longer. She took the blankets off of Isaac's feet and said, see, he has his daddy's feet. He is going to grow up and to be just like his daddy. I don't know how I held back the tears at that moment, but I did. This was still her moment and I wasn't going to take it away. I could see how weak she was and how she was trying to hold on and not doze off to sleep. She was trying so hard to keep her eyes open. She knew she didn't have time and not 1 second was going to be wasted. She was now a mommy to a beautiful baby boy, Isaac Joseph, the greatest sacrifice she will ever make in her lifetime, giving her baby back before she was ready to. I don't remember how the call ended, but the feeling of love she showed me in those moments, I will forever hold dear to my heart. I would have never known my grandson if she didn't give me those moments. That evening, I went to bed broken. I had so many questions and no answer. First time I wished I had someone to hold me and take away the pain. I didn't know what time I fell asleep, but I woke up in the hotel bed with tears and complete heartache. I heard from some of my children, but not my son. I kept praying for the journey that they would now be on, not one that neither one of them had ever imagined. How would these 2 young 20-year-olds get through something like this? I was numb. And the next day, but I couldn't stay in my hotel room, so I went to work. I would get bits and pieces of what happened through the rest of the family. I didn't expect to hear from my daughter-in-law. I wouldn't have ever known what to say to her. She would go home with no baby in her arms, but snuggled within her heart. She would have so many questions like all of us, but hers would be so intense. She would have to walk into the nursery that they had set up, and I had just sent them the whole bed set for the crib. I also sent them money for whatever they needed. Never for a moment did I ever think it would be needed to bring them home to bury their precious baby and my grandson. When I went to their home during Christmas, we walked up to a mountain at the Army base. I think it was like a 2-mile walk, but it seemed farther because the rocks we climbed and inclined. But when we finally got to the top, there was a cross and a stone that the words grace on it and John 3:16 on the other stone. I remember feeling I was on holy ground, and I got up to my knees and I started to pray. They both thought I was crazy, but I was overwhelmed. It was an overwhelming feeling, and I cried and I felt the presence of God on that mountain. When Isaac died, my son went back up to that mountain and wrote his name with spray paint on one of those rocks. My grandson had a memorial that whoever would climb to the top of that mountain, they would see his name and know that he did live and made a difference in the few hours that we were granted to know him before he was placed in the arms of Jesus. We all prepared for the memorial that would take place in Buffalo, New York. My grandson would be buried and given a stone, so all would know he did live and impacted lives during a short time. We were gifted to have him in our lives. The hardest thing I've ever seen was seeing my son and his wife sitting in front of the small box that held their hopes and their dreams, that held their love story in form of a child. That box held the greatest sacrifice that any parent would have to give. I looked at them, wishing some way I could take away the pain away from them. How does a mom say goodbye? Why did my son and daughter have to say goodbye before life even started for their little boy? Why were they given this cross to bear? This question may never be answered until we all reach glory, but are still questioning that. God understands. A piece of us was left at that gravesite that day, and a hole was replaced into our hearts. As we walked away from the cemetery and laid our little boy to rest, we went on with our lives. Some may not even think about him anymore, as it has been 5 years. My grandchildren have been born and new marriages have taken place. The loss of this precious little boy was too much to bear for these 2 young kids, and they both moved on. My daughter-in-law and I still speak, as we always have, Isaac, to keep us bonded together. She has told me one time that I would have been a great nana to him, and he would always be my grandson. The last time we saw each other, she gave me the greatest gift. She gave me the blanket that they wrapped Isaac in on the day that he was born. It sits with my rag doll. Both are very special to me. Last year, I went home in New York, and I felt an urge to go to the gravesite where Isaac laid. I thought I remembered where he was, and I cried when I got there because I couldn't find him. How could I not find my grandson? I was his nana. I called his mom, and she walked with me on the phone to where he was. I got at the phone with her, and I laid down a blanket and toys that I had bought for him, a tractor and some cows and other farm animals. I sang Old MacDonald's to him and the farmer in the dell to the top of my lungs, like I was with him sitting right in front of me. I had such a precious time with him, even with the ducks bugging me and near me. I needed that time, and I needed to feel like a nana for him that day. I pictured him in heaven with everyone saying, "That's my nana." So that is my story of my precious grandson.
Wow, man. That is one, amazing. Two, my heart started crying when you said the part about the feet, and because I was like there, I was just like, whoa, man.
She gave me a picture.
Oh my God, look at those.
She sent me a picture of his feet because my son is really tall. He's 6'2". So his feet were, Isaac's feet were monstrous. So that's
again, I feel like you're calling me out, okay? I feel like you're calling me out. No, that is truly amazing. And that's in the book, the story of Josephine.
Yes, it is in the whole different story is in the book, but I wrote this because I wanted to do something special for the release of my book. And so that's why I released it 5 years on St. Patrick's Day, because it was his 5-year anniversary. So I wanted to write a story, to honor him on his fifth birthday.
That is beautiful. That is a true honoring right there. And secondly, I want to say, you bring such a articulated perspective from being a grandmother, right? And there's something that I believe is changing in the world a little bit, where the grandmothers are starting to be noticed. But I know that when there is loss, especially that of a child, a lot of goes on the parents, primarily the mother. But there's such a broad spectrum, right? And that no one ever really pays attention to, or really hardly ever acknowledges. And I want to ask this question: why do you think that is? Why do you think that people kind of neglect the other people, like the siblings? Because the child still had aunties and uncles and cousins and grandmothers and grandfathers, etc. Right? Why do you think that? Why do you think that's left out of the equation?
I just think that the grief is so intense. And you know what? And I think that sometimes our children think as their parents and as the grandparents that we can handle anything. I just think that we, sometimes that we are, because we're told that we're the matriarch of our families, and that, we hover and we put everything together and we fix everything and we nurture and we find solutions to everything. And so I think that sometimes our children don't understand that we're really not superheroes. We are just as broken in times like that as they are, but we're supposed to be the pillars. And I think that sometimes they forget that pillars crumble at times and need to be rebuilt.
Yeah, I want to add to that as well. And this is just my thought pattern behind it. I think a lot of times people don't think it affects people in that area, right? Because coming from a place where I've lost a child before, and I would tell you from a personal standpoint, it was hard for me to see everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I did it intentionally, but it was because it felt so personal, which in a lot of ways it was very personal, right? Or at least that's the way that I had perceived it at the time. I realize now that it wasn't personal, right? I realized, and it was a hard truth to come to terms with, and I still struggle with coming to terms with it. But I think a lot of times, because I remember calling my mom, same thing, calling my mom, hey, your grandson just passed away, and I could hear my mother's heart break through the phone. And at the same time, I'm wanting to break down. And I heard those famous words, which made me want to get off the phone with her that much quicker. But I now understand where she was coming from. She said, baby, don't cry. I'm sorry. I almost lost it. I was like, whoa, who are you? Okay, Mama, I'm not going to cry. I realize now that I needed to cry.
Yeah.
But I also started looking at life from my mother's perspective. When I got off the phone with her, she told my sister, and they broke down. I started getting those phone calls in. And it was so hard for my mom to talk to me from that perspective.
Yeah.
It took me a good little bit to see how the world had changed for her, because I had a grandson, right?
Yeah.
And she's always had granddaughters, and I had a first grandson.
I think that's why it was so important for me when I went back to Buffalo. I really had this urge and this aching in my heart to go shopping for him, because he was a grandchild that I didn't get to shop for. I didn't get to, and I have grandchildren. I have grandsons that are all around Isaac's age. So when I went into the tractor supply store to buy a tractor, to buy cows, to buy horses and things, it was my way of being a nana. It was my way of bringing a gift, because that's what nanas do. We don't go into our grandchildren's homes without a gift. I have a set of 4 grandchildren that when I walk into their house, they're always going, Nana, you're so beautiful. I love you. Did you bring me gum? Because they know that's what a nana does. So that aching of not being able to buy Isaac any of those nana gifts. That's why I went to his graveside, and I sat there and I sang, and I do not sing very well at all. but I sang to the top of my lungs, farmer in the dell, farmer in the dell, farmer in the dell. I mean, so I didn't care who was listening because I wanted, and that's why I wrote, I believe that Isaac was up in heaven with a great cloud of witnesses going, I think that's my Nana, and coming and seeing me and introducing me to all the great prophets. And, that's my picture in my head, that he's introducing me to all the great prophets, say, that's my Nana. I needed that moment to be a Nana. I needed that moment to be able to grieve the loss and the dream that never happened. And I think that sometimes that people don't, that's also the death of something is also the death of a dream. It's also the death of an expectation. It also is the death of it's the death of a promise. It's the death of seeing things, through, that I will never, my daughter-in-law, my former daughter-in-law and my son, they'll never see Isaac grow to the full potential of who he could have been, because his life was lost, hours after he was born. And I think that sometimes people don't understand that loss is just not about the death. Loss is also about the promise of what life could have brought.
Yeah.
Life is also about the expectation of what could have been, but isn't. And I think that we not only grieve the death, the physical death, but we also have to grieve the spiritual and the emotional and the psychological death that takes part. And we forget that sometimes.
Yeah. I totally agree, right? And, because you look at the future, when you see a baby, you see a future, right? You wonder what sort of characteristics that they're going to have. What is their personality? How are they going to grow? Are they going to be a good kid, or are they going to be a handful? And all of these different things. And then you begin to look at clothing, right? Once they start to develop a little bit, you go, you know what? I think the baby would like this, right? And then because in our hearts, in our minds, and in the world that we live in that moment, we want that child to have everything and feel the love. We do. And then we map out their whole entire life,
Yep.
And it's
such a hard. And death is hard for the parents, because the other thing is that, these two kids were 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. And that's how they started off their life. That's how they started off the beginning of their future of what, and I was mad at God for a long time because they named him Isaac, so I'm thinking, God, they named him Isaac, a sacrifice, but yet you brought a lamb, to the sacrifice of Isaac. Why couldn't you bring a lamb for the sacrifice of my grandson? Why couldn't you have given us back, the child of promise? You told us 24 weeks. The doctor said 24 weeks. And in those 24 weeks, I had no doubt whatsoever. I believed without a shadow of a doubt that when my grandson hit 24 weeks, that he was going to live a full life. And in that, and he didn't. And in that, both of the parents have moved on, and that was the death of a relationship. That was the death of that promise that they made, that they were broken and couldn't move forward. It shattered two 19-year-olds.
Oh yeah.
In a way. Yeah. So they both have moved on with their lives and they're happy in their life. But as a Nana, what could have been? You think what could have been if that pain didn't take place, what would have happened? I just wrote a blog just the other day, because I write a blog on my website, healingthroughstories.com. And I wrote about one decision away. We're always one decision. Whatever decision we make, there's consequences to every single decision in our lives, whether they're good decisions or whether they're bad decisions. But there's a decision. And we all have a defining moment in our lives when we make a decision. And you're going to pay the consequences for any decision, whether good or bad. You're going to pay some consequences. And I think, when life happens and decisions are made, sometimes they take our breath away. And there was a movie years ago, I don't know whether you watched it, was called The Butterfly Effect. And it
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, it was kind of creepy. It was a kind of creepy movie a little bit, but the whole concept was is that they kept trying to change decisions in the midst of everything, and you're always going to get a different outcome, and you're not always going to get the greatest outcome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes if you say, "Oh, okay, let me change this decision over here," and you think that's going to be a better decision, but it doesn't turn out that way. So that butterfly effect like gets it in your head that we just as people, decisions are made, choices are made, and we just have to keep going forward. We just have to keep taking those decisions and allowing them to do what they're supposed to do and just keep walking forward. And at the end of our lives, all those decisions that we have made in our life have made us who we are today. We are continually becoming because of those decisions. And it breaks my heart that my son and my former daughter-in-law had to walk through what they had to walk through. It hurts me, and I cry often over it still. But I know that every decision that God has orchestrated it, that God has given them a way of escape, that God has given them a path, you know, to understand his goodness and his love, and to understand that this wasn't him taking something away from them. This was them becoming who they were called to be all along. And at the end of life, they're going to see, just like I had to see in my book, The Treasures of My Heart, even in the midst of the storms, there are still treasures. There's still amazing opportunities. There's still amazing gifts that they get through it all.
I want to add to that because I love that you said that, but you said something about the butterfly effect, you know, and I always look at things from the world, right? In general, you know, how we're designed, how God has designed us to see the world and decisions that we make. And I was thinking about it. I was like, you know, when I made the decision to change my life, I realized that the thoughts that were put out had gone, and as they were coming back, it just seemed as if nothing was going to go right for me. Right? It was just a tornado full of just stuff. But then I realized after I'd gone through the storm, what came after that was the thought that I had put out recently. So it was like all of those bad decisions, all of those choices that I had made that probably wasn't the best ones. I was getting the consequences of those first. And then the one when I decided to change my life around, those came a little bit later. So it was as if God had been clearing the path to get me on a clean slate so I could see the blessing. But when you're in the midst of the storm, it's kind of hard to see the blessing though, right? You know, and
Yes.
you got to see the effects not only from yourself, but you had the chance to see it from your son and his wife at the moment, the grandkids, the cousins, the uncles and aunties. Because as you said, you know, and I miss my grandmother. I do miss my grandmother. And it's, you know, she was the mortar. She was the everything in my family. And when she passed away, I watched everything because I observe people because I'm always learning. So you got the chance to see all of that. Now, how did everyone else receive that information? You know, like how was they affected as well? Because you're trying to hold yourself together as well as trying to hold everyone else together.
The other thing is that was very strange about this whole thing is that I was left out of the loop of a lot of it. You know, that they all talked, you know, because there's 6 children in the midst and they all consoled each other. They all were there for each other because I think that sometimes talking to a mom is hard. It's hard to be vulnerable, you know, and just like your mom saying, don't cry. It wasn't that she wasn't saying don't cry. It's just that she was just knowing the depth of pain. And as a mom, we don't want our children to experience that pain. And everything that our children do, And if it doesn't go the way that it's like orchestrated, we have it orchestrated, expectations in our mind, sometimes our children subconsciously think that they failed us. And so it's easier for them to stay away from us and talk to everybody else. Because just like moms are the strong towers in the family. So they don't want us to see that they're crumbling. So my son actually like spent more time talking to his siblings. And plus you have to remember, my son is an identical twin.
Yeah.
So as an identical twin, their relationship together is far greater than their relationship between a mom and a son. They have that bond that in a way, and I'm not being rude about this at all, but in a way they haven't needed me. They've needed each other. So I've been more like, I'm their mom, but I'm more on the back burner because they rely so much, on each other. So that was really difficult for me because my kids all talked amongst each other. And plus I'm not married. So I didn't have anybody laying in bed with me being able to talk about, talk through this. So sometimes when I did start talking through it, my kids took it that I was making it about me, but I wasn't making it about me. I just didn't have anybody to talk to, and I just needed to talk it through.
Right. And
just like they were talking it through, but for some reason with a mom, it's like you didn't have that permission to be able to talk through it. So it was just really difficult, in that aspect. They had too many other people in their lives that could console them. If that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense. And I want to say, you did a good job at raising him. And for the reason why I say that, because you touched on a lot of things that I don't think you really paid attention. So I just want to, from what I've heard, you was teaching your children to live in a world without you. As parents, this is our job. Our job is to teach them to live in the world without us, right? By passing down, good morals, right? Knowledge, wisdom, love, respect. You taught them well. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say when they start doing that, it's easy to take it personal, right?
Yeah.
But I see it from the other side of it, right? Because we're as adults, as parents, we're not going to be around forever. Mm-hmm. That's just a harsh reality. They need to know what to do when we're not here.
Yeah.
So, and what's happening a lot of times now, I think a lot of parents are teaching their children to be in the world with the expectation that the parents are going to be here forever. So they have, and I'm not saying anything bad about that. Protect your children. Mm-hmm. Just don't shield them from the world, because when you're gone, they still have to go out into the world. You're not going to be there to protect them. That is
and I think that people, absolutely. And I think that people don't talk about that, because that's another, there's all forms of death in life. That, there's death of the dreams, there's death of expectations, there's the death of the fact that I'm not a mommy anymore. I'm a mom. I'm no longer a mommy. So that's a death. That's an empty nest. That's nothing in my nest anymore. They all have flown away and have started their own lives. So those are so many different stages also in our lives. David Wilkerson, years ago, which he's no longer here, he's passed away. He was a famous pastor that he saved a gang leader from New York City. He was a famous preacher, David Wilkerson, and he talks about the death of a dream. And we have so many dreams in our lives and so many expectations in our lives that sometimes when we think about grief, we only think about the things that we lost that we're never going to see again until we reach glory. But there are so many other things in our lives that are lost. I will never celebrate a 50th wedding anniversary. I have been married and it's moved on. That was a death. And that's a death of a dream. That's a death of a promise. Raising my children and not having them ever come home again because they're all moving on with their lives. That was the death of that's a death of a dream. And not that they're not supposed to, but those kind of things, like, so I think that sometimes we need to look at grief and have some compassion and some empathy for people that are walking through life. We have a death of an expectation when their children decide, to do something wayward and to do something that breaks a mother's heart. That's also a death. So there's all kinds of death. When I moved from Buffalo to Georgia, I lived in that same house for 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a death, because I had to walk through that and give things so much away and lay it all down, to move on. But the thing is with death, the thing is with destruction, the Bible talks about turning ashes into beauty. But you know what? You can't turn ashes into beauty unless you've had a death, unless you've had a destruction, unless you have a fire, because that's what rebuilds. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that rebuild and create beauty. But we can't rebuild if we're hanging on to the heartache and the despair of a death that we have gone through. Any kind of death. We have to be able to look at that and look at the great architect, that he's rebuilding something for us. And now we get an opportunity to be part of that rebuilding. We get the opportunity to be part of, oh, you know what? I think I want green rooms this time. Oh, I think I want this furniture. But you can't go through that until you have a death. You can't go through that unless you've gone through the fire. Gold doesn't become gold until it's gone through the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything that we have gone through in our lives, we're in a potter's wheel to be transformed into something beautiful. So these deaths that we deal with and we go through in our lives, watch out, because something else is coming. You are becoming, something else is coming. So don't ever stop the process of the sorrow and the despair and the tears, because I'm telling you, the storm doesn't last forever. The rainbow does come out. The lemons, when you look at the lemons in your life, they do turn into lemonade. When you look at the storm will come. And who you become after the storm is what you should worry about, not the storm, because you are becoming.
I want to add to that, right? 'Cause I totally agree. And I want to bring the other side of it as well, because we've all gone through our own storms, right? That's how we became who we are today, because every storm, I may just see the storm just a little bit different, but along the same lines. When it's hard to see your path when you're in the midst of it.
Absolutely.
Grief is its own storm, right? It's emotional. It's the past, present, and future all combined in that one thing, right? It's very, very messy.
Yes.
Very messy. And depending on where you are in that mess, that beautiful chaotic mess, and I call it a beautiful chaotic mess to tie into what you said, because on the other side of it is another version of you.
Absolutely.
And this is just for me. Tell me what you think about this, right? When you're going through the midst of grief, and you got to go through the ups and downs, those loops, those back and forths, the falling off the cliff, climbing back up, the scraped knees, the staples in the head, and all kinds of other things like that, right? And these are just analogies.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going through that, you don't realize that beautiful chaotic storm that we call grief is stripping away things that you thought that you needed, mm-hmm. in order to give you things that you need in the new reality that you're about to go into.
Yeah.
So it's a process. I learned this, or it's something that I came up with, and that's what made me fall in love with the process of becoming, right? Of wanting to see who I was going to be on the other side of it. And I tell you, it was so hard, because I was angry, right? I wanted to run away. I wanted just to be honest with you, baby. I just wanted to be left alone. I did everything I could to make people leave me alone. Don't talk to me.
Yep.
You say the wrong thing to me. How do you know? Right? That was my go-to. Then I realized that what people were doing, and I think that's where everything started to change. What people were doing was trying to relate to me the best way that they could. But now I don't know, because I don't see that. It took me a long time to understand it wasn't personal. They were just they were doing the best that they could with what they had to work with.
Yeah.
Right. And, what do you say to someone who's gone through child loss or parental loss? Because you don't know their relationship. Right. You know what I'm saying? We don't.
No. And the other thing, when you think about it, is because when you have a loss, yeah. And when we have a loss in our life or anything in our life,
freezing up.
People are around us, and it's not a bad. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. People are around us for about 3 weeks. Human people are with you. If you have a death, they're coddling you, they're with you, they're feeding you, they're bringing things to you, they're making phone calls. But human nature, after about 3 weeks, you're by yourself. You got to deal with that grief by yourself, because they've moved on with their lives. You haven't. You're stuck in this grief, and now you have to deal with it alone. But there's a book. I don't know if you ever read the book called The Shack.
I have.
It was an amazing book. There's a scene, and I've watched the movie. There's a scene in there where the Holy Spirit leads him into a garden, and the garden was like filthy. It was a mess, and he's like complaining, going, "Look at all these weeds. Look at this. Look at what's going on," and stuff like that. We need to clean this up. And the Holy Spirit just says to wait. And then at the end of the book and at the end of the movie, The Shack, they go back into the garden, and the garden is a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful masterpiece, because we have to go through the weeds. We have to go through the process. We have to go through the grief. We have to go through the things that we feel like, the why questions. We have to go through what if questions. We have to go through being angry in order for those weeds to be taken out to create this beautiful, beautiful masterpiece. I wrote it in my book, The Journey of Josephine. I wrote, when we're little kids, we have this idea, this preconceived idea on how our life is going to turn out. So it's like we go to the store and we buy this puzzle, and we think all those pieces in that puzzle is going to create that picture, is going to create the picture that's on the box. And all the puzzle pieces are thrown onto the ground, and piece by piece, they're being put together. And we realize at the end that it's not the picture on the box, but it's just as beautiful, and it's just as much as a masterpiece as what the picture is on that box. But we have been trained to believe that these things are going to happen to us, and then these things happen to us over here.
Yeah.
But they're just as much of a beautiful masterpiece as ever. And I write that, and I write about that in my book, The Journey of Josephine. There were so many things that should have never happened to me. But who I am today, I would never change the person that I am today, and the trials and the heartache and the brokenness that I went through yesterday, because it has made me the person I am today, to be able to sit on your call and to bring hope to people, and to bring a conversation of saying, you know what? Yeah, I know it hurts, but I do know the outcome. I do know that sitting on the potter's wheel hurts. It hurts so bad. But the outcome is this beautiful vessel that has been created. I know having all those pieces thrown on the ground and having to pick them up and having to carry and having the tears flow down off of your face as you're putting these pieces together. Yeah, it hurts. But at the end, when all the pieces are together, the masterpiece is beautiful. I am not forgotten by God. If he knows the beginning from the end, and he knew me in my mother's womb, he knows who I'm going to become at the end. And I am his masterpiece. And I am not a broken little girl anymore. I'm the daughter of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. and I am a princess. But I had to go through the process, the grieving process, the hardship, the brokenness to be able to come to that point that I could write my story and then read my story and not even know who this person is anymore, because I have become who God has created me to be. And he took grief and he took sorrow and he took brokenness in my life to bring me to that point.
Yes. I want to add to that though. I definitely will, because I love that right there, right? And I was thinking about the pieces, and again, I'm just coming from my own perspective. You know, when I was experiencing my hardest grief journey or grief storm, it dawned on me that the pieces that had fell off was I no longer needed them. Now everybody's going to be different.
Yep.
Everybody's going to be different. That's the beautiful part about grief. You will do grief the way that you need to do grief, and it will have a different meaning for you, right? You know what I'm saying? And people will sometimes develop their own analogies about their own grief journey, right? And I love that, because there's no blueprint for it. There's no blueprint for it. Hey, if that's what you say, I'm all for it. I like to see the person that you become afterwards. I think that's the beautiful part, right? You know, and here's another fun fact, you know, for me, that brought me comfort. I realized, one, that people that had come before me that had gone through similar things, and I can go back and read the stories and see where everyone had that similarity across the board. And I was going, everybody kept faith. Let me dive deeper into my faith. Let me hold it, because right now my faith is shattered. Right now, I'm angry. I'm angry. I don't want to have nothing to do with you right now, because I can't believe that you hurt me like this. Right. And it was such a personal thing. And every time I turned around, I had to man up. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this work. Not understanding that I was falling right into the trap that I needed to be in the first place. Because me saying, I'm not going to let you whip me, Mammy, this thing whooped the crap out of me. It did. It does. I thought I was strong. I thought, no, you don't understand. I'm coming to church and I'm going to put a smile on my face just to show people how strong I really am. The downside to it is, and I speak for a lot of men, because, you know, I want to be respectful of this month being men's mental health. And I just want to bring a different perspective about what men will actually go through. All of that right there. I thought I was being strong until I was sitting out in the middle of the desert, 2 seconds away of putting a bullet in my head, because I convinced myself that it was the best thing for me. I didn't understand what was going to come after that. I just saw what was happening right then and there. I knew the pain that I was in. And I tell people, I was like, you know, it's not natural to be in this much pain and still be alive. How am I still breathing? You got me messed up. No. And then on top of there, I had no purpose. I had no direction. And it's not that I gotta go home and someone's dependent on me, right? Here's the reality of it was. I didn't think about my uncles. I didn't think about my aunties. I didn't think about my cousin. I didn't think about my nieces. I didn't think about my daughters. And the biggest person that, you know what I'm saying, that loved me the most and still loves me to this day, my best friend, my baby girl, my younger sister. I was so gung-ho on taking myself out of the game that it didn't even dawn on me how it would affect them. Because that grief right there, that it put me in a position to where I was like, nope, I got bill collectors, I'm homeless. What am I doing? everything that I've been doing, like you said, that potter's wheel, everything that I'm doing, the consequences, every choice that I'm making, it's nothing is moving in the right direction. What in the world is going on? And when you tell your story, I look at it from that perspective as well. Like, I don't really think people see that aspect until they have to go through it.
Absolutely.
And then they can see the whole 360. They can see the energy that goes from one person to the next, the situation and what they're experiencing, and actually being in that moment with them as they're going through their transformation, because their reality has changed as well, right? And
I
here's
think that people don't understand is that your story isn't for you, because not too many authors read their own books. We're writing for the people behind us. We're experiencing for the people behind us. Your story is not for you. You walked your story, but other people needed to see that you walked it and you fell down, but you got back up. They need to see that you were broken, but now you've been healed and set free. They need to see all the pieces on the ground and that you put them back together again and created a masterpiece. They needed to see that you went through the fire and you came out as gold. They needed to see that there were 3 men in the fire, but there was a 4th one and you never got burned. They needed to see that. They needed to see that the world put you in a pit, but then years later, you were going to save the rest of the people because you were ordained to do something greater. I think that people forget that. You were destined with a purpose, and that purpose is for the people behind you. You are a pioneer to your own life, because people need to have a guide. They need to have a life, a kit. They need to have an emergency kit, and you are their emergency kit. So it doesn't matter that you fell, because they need to know that you fall. They need to know that you go to church and you are like screaming to God saying, why? And you know what? God is so big that he wants you to do that, because his shoulders are big. Because when he looks at you, he doesn't see your mess, because he's already covered it by sending his son at the cross. So all he's seeing is for you to understand and to see yourself through how he sees you. He sees you as an overcomer. He sees you as a blessing. He sees you forgiven. He sees you set free. And all he's telling you to do is that, Tony, I want you to see the same thing that I see. Bambi, I want you to see the same thing that I see when I see you. I see an overcomer. I see somebody that when you look in the mirror, Tony, everything that you have been able to overcome, you did it. Not somebody else, you did it. You continue to make those choices to get up and to ride again. You continue to decide to make those choices to stand up and say, I can do today. Sometimes when we have grief and we have brokenness, sometimes we can only walk in that moment. And God says, okay, then let's do the next moment and the next moment. We don't have to have 5 years all planned out. All we have to do is to have today in that moment. And if you can only do that moment, then you do that moment, because somebody is looking at you to see whether you've done that moment, because now they can.
Yep. We talked about that too. We definitely talked about that. And that's the way I break my life up into those segments, right? I don't look at the full day, because the full day is not guaranteed to me, right? It's not promised to me or anything like that. But in this moment with Bambi, right, I'm learning so much. And when I get off, I may walk out, and that information that you just given me, I could probably pass on to someone else. More than likely, I'm going to pass it on to someone else, because I realize that what you're giving me, you've now let me be a carrier of a message that maybe I have a better understanding of it, but the person that's coming along to walk, that's coming along, that's going to allow me to walk with them to their next destination, maybe not understand that. And maybe I can articulate it to them in a way to where they can grab hold of it, right? Because I'm a firm believer. Now, I'm always a firm believer. It is okay if you're struggling in your faith.
Absolutely.
To grab onto someone else's faith. Until you're strong enough to develop your own. If you
Absolutely.
see something within Bambi or anybody, and you're wondering, wow, it's a strong person. Look at how they're doing life, and you listen to what they believe in. And yeah, for me, it doesn't matter what a person believes in as long as it makes you a good person.
Absolutely. And
I'm
knowing
not here
that,
to judge. Yeah, yeah.
and knowing the fact that, all the woman wanted that had the issue of blood, all she said, if I just touched his hem, if I could just touch the hem of Jesus's garment, that she would be healed. And sometimes if we can just open up our mouths to tell people, I'm struggling. Sometimes if we can just feed people encouragement, sometimes if we can just take people to the mirror and have them look at themselves in the mirror and say, you are your first hero. If we can just do that, the woman with the issue of blood, all she needed was the hem of his garment. And the hem, not the whole, she didn't need the whole garment. She didn't need to take everything. She just needed a piece. And sometimes in our lives, people are only looking for a piece, just a piece of your joy, a piece of your becoming, a piece of your testimony, because sometimes that's all that they need to be able to go forward. Sometimes they only need, I pay for people behind me in stores or at toll booths and stuff like that, because I have this idea in my head that people have prayed that morning, God, if something doesn't hold me today, today's going to be my last day. Bring something into my life that is going to show me that you're there. So I may be the person that I paid for their toll that behind them, and that may be their answer. I may be the person that bought their coffee or bought their sandwich, and that was the answer that they were looking for. So look around your sphere of people and your influence and know that you may be somebody's answer that they were looking for that day, or that they had prayed for that day. That billboard may be the answer of what they were looking for that day. We are living testimonies of what God has done in us and what he can do in others. So be that living testimony as people are grieving. Our world is in a bunch of trauma and heartache, and we're messed up, and they're looking for people that are willing to stand the ground and say, come, just touch the hem of his garment. All we need is just a piece. And we could be that piece into people's life. We could be their answer to prayer for that morning.
I want to add to that as well, because it was something, and I get this a lot. I do get this a lot. There's too many people trying to lead and not too many people trying to serve. You got a lot of people that want to follow someone else's path instead of trying to figure out their own, right?
Absolutely.
Because I never really understood the concept of following anyone. Because for one, I wouldn't want you to follow me. Don't follow me, because my path may not be equipped for you. I'm not that guy. I'm a servant. I'm a servant of my Father's, first and foremost, because now I have this beautiful gift that if I told people about it, they would look at me and go, what in the world? They would look at it like it's weird or this sad thing. But through that, there's this huge blessing that came along with it. There was this huge peace that I now carry with me, that no matter what happens in life, I do see the other side of the storm. And if I can give that to someone, not force it on them, but if I can be in that moment, they allow me to walk with them to their next destination. I'm going to share smiles with them and laughter, and I'm going to be there when they cry in their darkest moments and things like that. But I'm constantly going to give my gift to them, because it's not mine, right? And when it's time for us to part ways, I'll go. Right? Yeah. We don't have to fight. We don't have to. I'm going to wish you well. I want to see who you become. But take what I've given you and build off of there until you're strong enough to give it to someone else. This is how we're meant to be, right? We're meant to be messengers of that faith, of that strength, of that peace, of that inspiration, of being. I struggle with the word inspiration. I replaced it with example. And I go,
Mm.
if I can do it, this hurt boy that's gone through hell and back, if I can
Mhm.
do it and I'm a nobody, sweetie, I know you can do it because you got so
Amen.
much more inside of you than what I've ever had in me.
Absolutely.
And so, that's my message to people. If we can do it, especially, considering my past and everything else and the things I've done, the mistakes I've made, the people I've hurt, and vice versa, you know,
Absolutely.
and come out from being hurt to the point of wanting to give up in this world and have my life turn back around to be standing where I am and where we are, to be able to talk with Bambi and have people joining in and things like that. Man, I know that they can do it.
Absolutely.
And that to me right there, that's beautiful. That's
Absolutely.
my beautiful chaotic thoughts when I think about people going through those things. I was like, it's a beautiful chaos. It reminds us
Absolutely.
of the butterfly, right?
Yeah.
Butterfly starts off as this big old nasty caterpillar, you know what I'm saying, and things like that. But it gotta escape the birds and whatever other predators that are out there. And if it's strong enough to hide and things like that and can weather that storm, there's another transformation that comes. They go into that little cocoon. What happens
Yeah.
to the body in that cocoon? It goes into this crazy, ugly mesh. Guess
Yep.
what, people? That's your life, right? It goes
Absolutely.
to this crazy mesh of a soup, and
Yep.
then it comes out this beautiful butterfly, and the wings tell the story of that journey of how it had to dodge those predators and everything else, right? You know what I'm saying? To go,
That's
oh,
so
look at
funny that
me.
you bring that is so funny that you bring up about the butterfly, because what a book that I wanted to write, that I've always wanted to write, is the correlation between a monarch butterfly and salvation, and how from the start, from the egg that is put on the milkweed, which the milk is the living word of God, and they put it takes from point A to point B is 40 days, which is the number of completion, is the number of days that they were in the wilderness, it's the number of days that Jesus prayed, it's the number of days. Then when a monarch butterfly is a caterpillar, they shed their skin 7 times, which is the number of perfection. Then they go in and they go up, which, they're heading to heaven, and they turn themselves into a letter J, which is Jesus. Then they form this cocoon around them, and there's a gold crown that they weave around that green cocoon for them to spend that time within the cocoon. And as God's doing all of his work and all of his mess and getting rid of all of that mess to turn something beautiful, the cocoon hatches into a butterfly. And you cannot touch that butterfly. If you touch that butterfly before the blood has flowed through the butterfly, it dies, because the blood of Jesus has to go through our body for us to have life and life eternal. So since I was, I don't know, my early 20s, I've always wanted to write a children's book on the process of the monarch butterfly and how it correlates with the salvation message for us as believers and how we got to where we are today. So it's funny that you brought up the butterfly.
Well, again, everything kind of segues into everything else, right? I had no idea that that's what you were thinking, but it was just something I was started thinking. I was like, you know what? I love this analogy because since the beginning of time, there's always been things that we can relate to, from the
Yes.
trees to the grass to the flowers to the animals, how we all connect to everything else. I think the challenge is we have to understand the language, because everything is always communicating, right? Deers communicated with deers, what I'm saying? Butterflies, caterpillars, everything communicates with things that are alike. We
Yeah.
as people, we communicate with other people, whether if it's a different language or not. There's always a connection there. When we begin to understand the difference, the different languages that everything speaks, it draws us closer to understanding this whole beautiful chaotic mess and how
That
to
really
uplift
isn't
each other.
that really isn't a mess after all.
That really isn't a mess after all. It's part of the process. This is something that I learned, and it's something that I picked up on listening to motivationals, because I couldn't afford to go see anybody in person. So I had to listen to them on YouTubes and things like that. And I had to listen to the message that they were
Yeah.
speaking. And I realized that there was something solid across the board. And it was everybody was saying, fall in love with the process. Fall in
Mm,
love with the process. Fall in love. And it dawned on me when I was going through the process, it dawned on me what the process was.
mm,
And I can't say it because it's so simple that if I told everybody, it'll go across your head.
mhm.
But fall in love with the process,
Yeah,
and the
absolutely.
journey will lay itself out for you. It's,
Absolutely.
and it's another thing. Your why has to be stronger than everything that you're going through. That was another thing that was solid too. Everything that you're going through, make sure that you got something to hold on to
Yeah.
because it's going to get rough.
Yep.
It's not
Find
going
your
to just
why.
give it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to
Simon
find
Sinek.
your why.
Simon Sinek writes a book about that.
Mm.
Find your
Yes,
why.
yes,
Once you find your why, you understand your purpose and you'll never leave your purpose behind. When
exactly.
my why in my life is to be able to show women and people that you can become a hero within your own skin, that you don't need to look at other people and that your stories tell your message. That if you
Mm-hmm.
walk in your story, it leads you to your message. And the more that you tell your story, the more set free you become. And that is my why, is to help women and children and men, if for that matter, to find your why, to find your purpose and journey after that and become healed and set free and know that everything that you've been through in your life is because you were called to be set free.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
everybody has their why. I mean, Simon Sinek is one of my favorite motivational
Oh yeah,
speakers.
I love the guy.
Love him.
I love his attitude. I love the way
Yep.
that he approaches business. And what I'm saying, he's
Yeah.
like, you don't have to be the butthole in the business. You can have a successful business by treating people well.
Absolutely. Mel
And I
Robbins is
love it
another
too.
one. Yeah, Mel Robbins is another one.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
The
oh
five
yeah.
second rule.
I was just
Don't
about
say
to say
no.
that as you were saying
Don't
that,
say
right? The 5 second
yeah.
rule, right?
Because if you wait till
Uh,
if you wait till your brain gets to 6 seconds, your brain already has fear. So you
yeah,
live in the 5 second rule. So you say, okay, I'm going to do that. And that has made me be able to do things in my life that I would have never done before
yeah,
by programming my brain to say yes.
yes.
So I've touched
Another one.
stingrays, I've gone skydiving, I've been in a hot
Ooh.
air balloon. I would never skydive again, but I bet I did it. But I did it. But that was the
As
5 second
long as you
rule.
did it right, but I love the way that you say, I'll never do that again. But I did it, but
I
we're not
did
doing
it.
that no more, right? But I love that. And here's another one. And there's so many other. There's Coach Payne. There's Jay Shetty. There's Les Brown. There's
Brian Brown. Yeah.
T.D. Jakes. There's Eric Thomas. One of my favorite ones though, and it goes back to what we said about the suffering part. David Goggins. You got to put your brain into the fire. You got to beat on it. You
Yes.
got to you got to callous that brain. But in order to grow, you have to suffer.
Yes. I
In
love
order
that.
to grow,
Put
you
your
have
brain
to
into the
suffer.
fire.
Now, that's the now here that's the part that people don't want to hear.
Put your brain into the fire. I
They
love
don't
that.
want to hear that part. In order to grow, you have to suffer. Nothing comes from playing it safe. And if
Yeah.
you're not going, like you can't have great things without going through the worst things in your life, because it's going
Absolutely.
to you have to be challenged in order to get outside of your shell.
Absolutely.
So many people get so comfortable being in their shell. I know.
because
I
it's
was
safe.
one of
They
them.
think it's safe, but
Uh-huh.
really it isn't safe. Really, it's keeping you in bondage. You
Yeah.
know, the
But that's
Bible
what it
says
is though,
the
right?
prison
What's
gates.
easier?
Yep,
What's easier?
absolutely.
Is it easier to sit on the couch and eat ice cream and bonbons and do the whole war is me?
Yeah,
Or is it easier to get up and say, you know what, today I'm going to go run that 5 miles.
yeah.
Today I'm going to go do those 100 push-ups.
Well, I'm not doing any of that.
I mean, but think about it, right? We do it in our own way.
Yeah.
As my friend Jay Lewis said, it's like playing mental jujitsu.
Ooh, yeah.
It's like doing mental jujitsu. How are you training your brain to get through
Yeah.
those tough times? It's mental jujitsu. Look, physically, right? We can go out here and do whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
That's only part of the battle. Anybody can go out there and do that. But what are you going to do when you don't want to do those things? Or like you said, Mel Robbins, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the whole NASA thing, right? Or how are you treating this up here? Are you giving in to mediocrity? Or are you going out there to be great? Because here's another quote from David Goggins. It's so easy to be great nowadays because no one wants to get outside of their comfort zone. No one wants to see what's on the other side of the pain. I look at grief the same way. It's look, no one wants to see what's on the other side of the sorrow and the depression because it's easy to be a victim. It's easy to get people to feel sorry for me. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't want you to do that for me. I want you to be truthful with me and say, this is about to be messed up.
Yeah.
This
I have friends in my life. I actually have friends in my life that, throughout all this trial and tribulation and brokenness that I've been through all my years, they'd say, Bambi, I'll give you 10 minutes. 10 minutes to shout, to scream, to swear, to throw things. But after that 10 minutes, now we're going to feed you the truth. So you need friends in your life that allow you to grieve, but then say, okay, now let's get back up and let's realize who you really are. And, and that's helped me. And there's times that my friends were so gracious to me that because I was a baby and there was times that I was sick and I didn't have anybody around that have ever cared necessarily for me. And my friends knew that I was sick for one more day because I knew they were going to come over and baby me. Mm-hmm. My friends knew that, but they allowed me to do that. And then they came to a point in saying, okay, now let's heal from this. Now let's see who you really are and not telling yourself the stories in your head, thinking that you're not wanted, you're not beloved, that you're not somebody that people need. Now let's start feeding the truth. But they allowed me, and that's what people need. We need to allow people to grieve, but then there has to come a point that go, you know what? I'm not telling you don't have to grieve anymore, but now you should start be walking. You start, you've watered the plant and now let's see the plant bloom. That grief hurt you. That grief, devastated you. That grief did something to you, but it also planted seeds. And all those tears that you have shed, now those seeds want to grow. Now it's time to let's talk life now and not always talk death. Now let's start talking, life into your world. So I think that's, something that people need to do. And that's why I wrote my story, The Journey of Josephine, is that my story, I wrote it so other people that they would have permission to be able to tell their stories, but then they can move forward into their story, opening up the dialogue, opening up the conversations to be able to start talking about our grief and start talking about our trauma and what we have been through in our lives. But then I think it's so cool that the second book was finding the treasures within my grief, finding the treasures within my brokenness. And that's where, the treasures of my heart, came forth. So, and it's given me these opportunities to be able to be on these podcasts and be on these lives and talk and to use my voice to bring healing to the brokenhearted. Years ago, I had this vision and I had this dream that God had shown me that I was walking on a platform and I was going to stand in front of a podium, and outside of the in the audience were all these people that looked like homeless people, and they had words written across their chest: shamed, unforgiven, destructive, and and I started talking, and I started giving my testimony and what God had done in my life. And I saw the audience change their clothing, and I saw the words change that were written across their chest: beloved, set free, redeemed, courageous. And I was asking God just recently, when is that going to happen? When is that dream going to come forth? And I believe that dream is coming forth even today on your podcast. I believe that dream is coming forth, and any kind of opportunity that I have to be able to share that I once was broken. I once was lost. I once was defeated. But God came in and he took a broken little girl and he took her on a path to life. And he showed me that in my journey of Josephine, that I have been set free, so other people can also be set free. So this is my podium. This is my audience that God has shown me, that when I can speak life into people's life, that their lives begin to change, that they are not unforgiven, but they are forgiven. They are not lost, but they are found. They are not blind, but they can see. And that's what we do. That's what you do every week on your podcast, is that you are also bringing hope to people. And you gave me the privilege and the honor and the blessing to be able to come onto your show and to be able to speak blessing and life and abundance into your audience. And I am so thankful that you did that for me.
And that appreciation and gratitude goes both ways. It definitely does. I never take anything from anyone without giving back something in return. See, that's the whole yin and yang now, right? We can pour into each other's cups. Like I said, I'm just a curious guy. Without the Bambis, without the audience, I wouldn't be able to do what I do.
Yeah.
I was given something and said, do something with this. And I said, I don't know what to do. Well, you have to start and then I'll help guide you along the way. I was given a chance, and you guys give me the opportunity by honoring me with your stories and helping so many other people out. As I said before, and I say it again, I'm just a servant. That's it. I'm just a servant. I'm no more, no less. I've been given something to be able to serve more people, because we can serve those that are in our direct facility. We can go out into our communities, but this way we can reach so many more people to give them hope and to share these amazing stories and become a voice, help them find their voice, help them find those avenues of healing that they never thought about. And that right there, that's worth it for me.
Thank you.
Because
absolutely,
the gift that we was given, we can't take it with us. And Dr. Miles Monroe, and I'm gonna say this before we get off, Dr. Miles Monroe said something very, very profound. He said, when you identify your gift, you have to work as if you owe it, because you do. It's not yours. So the people, he goes, here's the truth that you have to understand. When people come into your life, they're not there for you. They're there for what you carry. And it's your job to give it to them. I know what my gift is. And I move every day, as well as so many other inspiring people out here in this world. We move every day as if we owe you this gift, because we do. Yeah. It's not ours. I'm not going to take it to the grave with me. Why would I contribute to a place full of people that can't talk me? They can't do nothing with this. I refuse to do that. Just like yourself, refuse to do it. No, look, every day I get up and I go into a room, I'm looking around. Who needs this? Who needs this? Who do I need to give this to? And I do that all day long. That way, when I go home, I know I've replenished what I needed to for that day.
Yes.
And when I sleep, my cup is being poured into. See, if you don't have it to pour into me, let me pour into you so you can give to someone else. My gift don't stop until it's done.
Absolutely.
That's the meaning behind this thing.
Yeah.
That's the meaning behind it. Now, before, first off, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for just blessing me with your story, and with the audience and everyone else. Thank you guys for tuning in on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. You guys, thank you, and being back in the background. Hopefully, you guys had a blast. Please go check out Bambi. Bambi, before I let you go, if you can leave the audience with something, what would you leave them?
Tell your story. Your story is meant to be told. Your story is not meant just to be lived, but your story is meant to be told for the people behind you. And continue to have these conversations, continue to have the empathy for the people that are behind you. We're all running around. We're all living this thing called life, and it's not always easy. So be patient and be kind to the people before you, and look in the mirror every morning and know and see that reflection and know that you have lived through a lot and you are the first hero in your own life. And go out there and pick up my book. You can go on my website, healingthroughstories.com, which is all one word. You can subscribe to my blog that I put out once a week. And if you have a story that you would like to have other people read and have a testimony, I do give people permission to email me, called josephine.rstory@gmail.com, that you can email me your story and I will post it on my blog. You can also reach me. I am on LinkedIn as Bambi Makowski. I am on Facebook as Bambi Lynn, and I am on Instagram, lynn.bambi. So this is my first book, The Journey of Josephine, that is for sale on Amazon and also on my website. And you can also order it in any kind of bookstore that you want, or pick it up at the library. This book, The Treasures of My Heart, is my newest book. You can also order it on Amazon. You can also order it on my website. Just like every other author, we would love for you to go on our website, instead of going to Amazon, because Amazon does take a huge cut, from us. But this is The Treasures of My Heart by Bambi Lynn. So this was such a privilege, and it was such an honor, to be able to be on your show today.
I had a blast. You had already answered the last one, because I was like, tell people what about you. You already on top of that. Look, you go stop that. I told you, me and you, we're gonna have to talk about this. No, it was such a great conversation. Thank you again. Thank you to everyone who's been tuning in. And this is going to conclude this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Tune in tomorrow. We have another great episode. I know we got Father's Day coming up, and I have something special coming for you guys as well. It's going to be something that I'm going to be doing at the end of the month in honor of Men's Mental Health Month. And it's going to be a week-long event. It's going to be live streamed. We're going to be going in depth with men's mental health. So women, other men out there, tune in for that one. We're going to be going deep, some things. If you guys got questions or anything, you want to tune in and ask those questions, we're going to get an answer for you. Bambi, again, thank you for being a part of the show. Amazing, fabulous. And with that being said, you guys enjoy your day. Hopefully you guys are out there making smiles and making memories with friends and family. And don't forget to remind them that you love them, because tomorrow's not guaranteed. And with that being said, you guys, we'll see you in the next one.